You know, there's something absolutely fascinating that happens when you begin to pay attention to your thoughts. Not having thoughts, mind you, we all do that, but actually watching them. And what you discover, if you stay with this long enough, is quite extraordinary. You notice that there's a peculiar distance between you and your thinking. The thoughts arise, dance about, create all sorts of havoc, and yet there you are, watching them do their thing. Let me give you a very concrete example of what I'm talking about. Suppose you wake up in the morning, and immediately, before you've even opened your eyes properly, there's this thought, oh God, I have that meeting today, I'm going to make a fool of myself, they're going to see right through me. I don't know what I'm doing. Now, the usual way we experience this is complete identification. The thought appears, and we become it. We don't say there's an anxious thought arising, we say I'm anxious. We've collapsed the distance between the awareness and the content of awareness. We've mistaken the weather for the sky. But here's what's curious. If you can notice that you're having that thought, if you can observe yourself thinking, I'm going to make a fool of myself, then who is doing the noticing? You see, the thought itself can't notice itself. That would be like an eye trying to see itself without a mirror. There must be something else present, something that stands apart from the stream of thinking, something that watches. Now, most people, when they first encounter this idea, immediately create another problem. They think, aha, I must become the watcher. I must cultivate this observer. And then they start trying very hard to watch their thoughts, which creates this bizarre internal struggle, like a dog chasing its tail, because the moment you try to be the watcher, you've created another thought, another object to watch. You've just added another layer to the confusion. The real trick, and this is delightful when you get it, is to realize that you're already the watcher. You always have been. You don't need to become something you already are. The watching is happening right now, automatically, effortlessly. Even as you listen to these words, even as thoughts arise in response to what I'm saying, there's an awareness of all of it, isn't there? That awareness doesn't need to be manufactured or achieved. It's the very ground of your experience. Let me put it another way. Your negative thoughts are like clouds passing across the sky. Now, if you're identified with the clouds, you think you are dark and gloomy. The weather becomes your identity. But the sky, the vast open space in which clouds appear, is never troubled by the clouds. It doesn't resist them or cling to them. It simply allows them to drift through. Sometimes there are storm clouds, sometimes wispy little cirrus formations. Sometimes the sky is perfectly clear, but the sky itself remains unchanged, spacious, fundamentally at peace. You are that sky. Not the thoughts, not the emotions, not the stories you tell yourself, but the awareness in which all of these arise and pass away. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you stop identifying with your negative thoughts, when you simply watch them as phenomena arising in consciousness, something remarkable happens. They lose their power. Not because you've fought them or suppressed them or replaced them with positive affirmations, but because you've seen through them. You've recognized them for what they are. Temporary events in awareness, no more substantial than a dream. Think about dreams for a moment. When you're in the middle of a nightmare, it's absolutely terrifying. The monster is real, the danger is real, your fear is real. But the moment you wake up, what happens? Instantly you realize, oh, it was just a dream. The fear doesn't gradually diminish, it evaporates in recognition. Why? Because you've shifted your identification. You're no longer the character in the dream, you're the one who was dreaming. The same thing happens with waking thoughts. When you're lost in a negative thought pattern, ruminating about the past, worrying about the future, criticizing yourself, it feels completely real and solid. But the instant you step back and recognize, this is a thought, the same kind of shift occurs. Not that the thought necessarily vanishes, but it no longer has the same weight, the same gravitational pull. Let me give you another example. Something quite ordinary. You're stuck in traffic, late for something important, and the mind starts up, this is unbearable. Why is this happening to me? That idiot in front shouldn't be on the road. I'm going to be late, and everyone will think I'm unreliable. My whole day is ruined. Now that's one level of experience, pure identification with the thought stream. And in that state, you genuinely suffer. Your body tenses, your jaw clenches, your blood pressure rises. The thoughts create a whole physiological response. You're trapped in the story your mind is telling. But suppose, right in the middle of this mental storm, you suddenly remember, wait, I'm thinking. Just that simple recognition. Suddenly there's space. The traffic hasn't changed, the lateness hasn't changed, but your relationship to the whole situation has transformed. You're no longer drowning in the thoughts, you're watching them from the shore. And here's what's beautiful. From that watching position, you might notice something you couldn't see before. You might notice that the thought, this is unbearable, is actually not true, because you're bearing it, aren't you? You might notice that the story about everyone thinking you're unreliable is just that, a story, a fiction your mind has created. You might even notice a kind of humor in how seriously the mind takes itself, spinning these elaborate narratives about absolutely everything. This isn't about positive thinking, you understand. I'm not suggesting you replace my day is ruined with everything is wonderful. That's just swapping one thought for another. What I'm pointing to is something much more fundamental. The recognition that you are not the thoughts themselves, but the space in which thoughts appear. When you really get this, not intellectually, but as a lived reality, your entire relationship with negative thinking changes. Because you're no longer asking, how do I get rid of these thoughts? That question assumes you're locked in battle with your own mind. Instead, you simply notice, the mind is producing worried thoughts right now. How interesting. There's no enemy. There's just the natural activity of consciousness watching itself. Now, the mind, being very clever, will try to co-opt even this understanding. It will say, great, I've found the technique. I'll just watch my thoughts, and then I'll be free of suffering. And then it turns watching into another task, another goal, another thing to achieve. And round we go. But genuine watching isn't a technique. It's not something you do. It's what you are. It's the most natural thing in the world, as natural as the space in a room, which doesn't have to try to be spacious, it just is. Let me approach this from yet another angle. Have you ever noticed how thoughts tend to create more thoughts? One negative thought triggers another, which triggers another, like dominoes falling. I'm not good enough leads to I never do anything right, leads to I'm a failure, leads to I'll always be alone, and on and on. The mind is tremendously efficient at creating these cascades. But here's the thing. Each of those thoughts requires your identification to continue. They need you to believe in them, to take them seriously, to think they're about you rather than simply events in you. The moment you step back, the moment the watcher emerges from the shadows, the cascade loses momentum, not because you've done anything to stop it, but because you've stopped feeding it with belief. Think of it like this. Thoughts are like visitors knocking at your door. When you're identified with them, you invite them in, sit them down, serve them tea, listen to their whole story. Before you know it, they've moved in and taken over your house. But when you're established as the watcher, you simply notice, there's worry at the door, there's self-criticism, there's fear. You don't have to answer. You don't have to engage. You can let them knock, and eventually they move on. They always do. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached or unfeeling. Quite the opposite. When you're no longer identified with every thought and emotion that arises, there's actually more space for genuine feeling, for authentic response. You're not reacting automatically from conditioning. You're responding from presence. Here's a profound paradox. The more you can watch your negative thoughts without resistance, the more they tend to dissolve. But, and this is crucial, if you watch them in order to make them dissolve, you've missed the point entirely. That's just another strategy of the mind, another form of resistance dressed up as acceptance. True watching has no agenda. It's not watching for something. It's simply the clear seeing of what is. You know, there's a wonderful thing that happens when you settle into this watching awareness. You begin to notice patterns. You see how the mind has its favorite stories, its well-worn grooves. I'm not good enough might be a greatest hit that plays over and over. Or people can't be trusted, or life is unfair. And when you see these patterns from the watching place, you realize these aren't truths about reality. They're just habits of thinking, neural pathways that have been strengthened through repetition. And here's what's marvelous. You don't have to believe them. You never did. You can let them run their course like old records playing in another room while you remain undisturbed in the spacious awareness that you truly are. Now, I want to be very clear about something because this is where people often get confused. When I talk about watching your thoughts, about being the witness, about not identifying with the mental chatter, this isn't about dissociation. It's not about floating off into some abstract spiritual realm where nothing touches you. Quite the opposite, actually. When you're genuinely established in awareness in this watching presence, you become more alive, not less. Colors are brighter, sounds are clearer. You're more present to the actual texture of your experience, rather than lost in thoughts about your experience. You see, when you're identified with thinking, you're always one step removed from life. You're living in a kind of virtual reality created by language and concepts. But when you step back into awareness, you step into the immediacy of what's actually happening. Let me illustrate what I mean. You're eating a meal. If you're lost in thought, planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, judging the food, judging yourself for eating it, you're not really tasting anything. You're just going through the motions while your attention is absorbed in mental activity. But if you're present as awareness, actually watching the thoughts come and go without being captured by them, suddenly you can taste, really taste. The flavors are vivid, the sensations are rich, and there's a simple pleasure in the experience that thinking completely obscures. This is true of everything. Walking, breathing, listening, touching. When you're not identified with the thought stream, these ordinary experiences reveal themselves as extraordinary. The negative thoughts might still arise. I should be doing something more productive than just walking or whatever. But they're seen as transparent, like seeing through a dirty window to the garden beyond. And here's something else that happens. You begin to notice that the watcher itself has no problems. Think about that. The awareness that's watching your worried thoughts isn't worried. The consciousness that's observing your angry thoughts isn't angry. The space in which all these mental events occur is fundamentally peaceful, fundamentally okay. It's like the screen in a movie theater. It remains untouched whether the film being projected is a tragedy or a comedy. This is extraordinarily liberating when you really see it, because it means that the peace you're looking for isn't something you need to achieve. It's what you already are, beneath the turbulence of thinking. You don't need to fix yourself, improve yourself, or become enlightened. You just need to recognize what's already here, what's been here all along. But, and here's where the mind gets very tricky, you can't use this recognition as a way to bypass your actual experience. Some people hear this teaching and think, perfect, I'll just be the witness, and then I don't have to feel my difficult emotions or deal with my problems. That's spiritual bypassing, and it doesn't work. The watching I'm talking about doesn't avoid anything. It includes everything. It's a spacious allowing of whatever's arising, whether pleasant or unpleasant. The negative thoughts come, and you watch them. The painful emotions come, and you watch them too. You don't suppress, you don't escape, you don't pretend they're not happening. You simply don't mistake them for who you are. There's a tremendous difference between I am anxious and there is anxiety being experienced. Can you feel it? The first is total identification. You've become the anxiety. The second is observation. Anxiety is occurring in the field of your awareness, but you're not collapsed into it. And from that place of observation, something very interesting can happen. The anxiety can be felt fully, completely, without the secondary layer of resistance and story-making that usually accompanies it. You see, most of what we call suffering is actually the resistance to pain, not the pain itself. The negative thought arises, that's just a mental event. But then we think, I shouldn't be having this thought. What's wrong with me? Why am I always like this? And now we've created suffering on top of discomfort. We've added a whole narrative structure that magnifies and perpetuates the original disturbance, but when you're watching, there's no resistance. The thought arises, and it's simply noted, our criticism, our worry, our despair. There's no judgment about the fact that these things are arising. They're just weather patterns in consciousness, no different than clouds in the sky or waves on the ocean. And when there's no resistance, even quite intense thoughts and feelings can move through relatively quickly. They're not being held in place by the struggle against them. This is what real freedom is. Not the absence of negative thoughts. They'll keep arising as long as you have a human brain. But the freedom from being tyrannized by them. The freedom to have a worried thought without becoming a worried person. The freedom to experience anger without believing you are angry. The freedom to watch the whole show with a kind of interested curiosity rather than desperate concern. And gradually, as you live from this watching awareness more and more, something shifts in the very structure of your experience. The thoughts don't stop, but they become quieter, less insistent. It's as if they realize you're not paying them the same kind of attention anymore, and they don't need to shout so loudly. The mind begins to settle, like sediment falling to the bottom of a glass of water, leaving the water clear. But again, and I really want to emphasize this, you can't try to make this happen. The trying is more thinking, more doing, more of the ego attempting to engineer its own transcendence. What I'm pointing to is available right now in this moment, without any effort whatsoever. Just notice thoughts are happening, and you're aware of them. That's it. That simple recognition, that basic awareness is what you are, not the thoughts. The awareness. You are the watcher, the witness, the open space of consciousness in which the whole drama of your life unfolds. And from that perspective, even your most troubling thoughts become objects of fascination rather than sources of suffering. They're just part of the dance, the play, the marvelous display of consciousness knowing itself.
Have you ever dreamed of one day standing firm like a rock in the middle of a waterfall, indifferent to criticism, unafraid of being abandoned, unshaken by the invisible cuts that others leave behind, unintentionally or deliberately? You imagine yourself becoming a steel statue, cold, invulnerable, so that finally you can rest. Let go of the burden of always having to be okay, always strong, always maintaining the perfect image that even you have grown tired of building. But pause for a second. Listen to this, not as empty advice, but as a whisper from the very darkness you're trying to avoid. The more you try to escape pain, the tighter it clings to you. The higher you build your walls, the more you become a prisoner in your own fortress. The more you pretend I'm fine, the more pain seeps through every crack, gnawing at you from within until you're exhausted yet still forcing a smile. This isn't a lecture on weakness. This is a call to courage. Pain isn't an enemy to destroy, but a messenger from the depths of your soul. It doesn't come from the venomous words out there, not from betrayal or the voids others leave behind. It only truly stabs you when it touches an old wound, the story you keep replaying in your head, the fear of abandonment, the belief that if I'm good enough, strong enough, lovable enough, no one will hurt me again. You see, the world doesn't have absolute power to break you. That power lies in how you receive what happens. One person can be rejected and still smile as they move forward, because there's no empty space left inside for old pain to echo. Another can collapse from a single cold glance, because that look awakens a chorus of past rejections. So where's the difference? Not in the event, but in the internal point of contact. The same arrow, but some wear armor, others bare their chest. The armor here isn't coldness or numbness, that's just a fake shell, bound to crack sooner or later. Real armor is awareness, knowing exactly where your wound is, why it's bleeding, and instead of covering it, you sit down, look it straight in the eye and whisper, I see you. That's when the miracle happens. Not because the pain disappears, but because it loses its power. It's still there, still aching, but it no longer controls you. You no longer react like a puppet on strings. You observe, you feel, and you choose how to respond. But before stepping into that journey, admit a hard truth. You're still trying to control the world. You believe that if you're smart enough, kind enough, talented enough, life will treat you fairly. You live in constant tension, anticipating every twist, defending against every possibility of hurt. And that very control is the rope binding you tightest. You don't need more defense techniques. You need more light. Light shining into the corners you call the past, mistakes, shame. Light doesn't erase darkness, but it turns darkness from a lair of demons into just a part of your house, old, dusty, but yours. And here's the key. Freedom doesn't lie in the world changing, but in you stopping giving the world power. Everything outside only has strength when it finds an echo inside. When that echo falls silent, not because you cover your ears, but because you've made peace with it, then even if the wind howls, you stand still. If you're nodding, if something in your chest is stirring, then pause for a second and place your hand on your heart. Feel the beat. That's the reminder. You're still alive, still have the chance to go deeper. The next part will take you down one more level, where automatic reactions, sudden anger, wordless sadness, all have origins. They're not random. They're letters from the forgotten part of you. Are you ready to open the envelope? Imagine your life as a ship speeding through the dark night. On deck, you declare yourself captain, holding the wheel, barking orders, adjusting sails, checking the compass. You believe you're leading the journey, but in the pitch-black hold below, there's someone else, nameless, faceless, quietly pulling the throttle, dropping anchor, even stoking the engine fire. Every time the ship suddenly veers, you're surprised, irritated, blaming the waves outside. You have no idea that the real driver has never come on deck. That driver is the unconscious. Not some vague mist, but a complete operating system. Buried memories, suppressed emotions, forbidden desires, fears of abandonment. It never sleeps. It works 24 hours a day, sending signals through sudden anger, unexplained tears, rational decisions you later sabotage. You ask, why does an offhand comment shatter me? Because that comment isn't offhand. It's the key that fits an old lock. The lock named not good enough, unworthy, will be left behind. You hear the click, and the whole door to the past swings open. Images of parents turning away, friends going silent, lovers disappearing. The present words are just the fuse. The bomb was planted long ago. And what do you do with the bomb? You seal the lid. You say, don't think about it, forget it, be strong. You shove it into a dark corner, cover it with dust labeled, I'm fine. But the bomb doesn't vanish. It builds pressure. One day, a light breeze is enough to detonate it, and you call that a bad day. Alan Watts once laughed. You can't control the river by standing on the bank shouting commands. You have to jump in, let the current take you, then learn to swim with it. The unconscious is the river. The more you resist, the harder it pulls. The more you pretend not to see it, the more it surfaces as repeating relationships, self-destructive habits, midnight anxiety. But there's another way. Sit down with the driver in the dark, not to chase him away, not to seize the wheel, just to look him in the face. Ask, who are you? What do you want? What are you afraid of? At first he'll growl. He'll hurl horrific images at you. The time you were laughed at in class, the time you begged someone not to leave, the time you stood alone in a crowd. Don't run. Don't shout. Just stay. As Watts said, the only way to master a nightmare is to step into it and ask what dance it wants to do. When you stay, something strange happens. The driver is no longer the enemy. He's a misunderstood protector. He pulls the throttle because he believes slowing down is dangerous. He drops anchor because he fears you'll drift into deeper waters. He stokes the fire because he's afraid you'll freeze in your own loneliness. Everything he does stems from a distorted loyalty to the child version of you who still believes, if I don't control, I'll die. And this is when you reach out, thank you for keeping me alive. I'm grown now. I can drive. No need to fight. No need to exile. Just dialogue. Every time you do, an invisible rope loosens. The ship stops jerking. You start to feel the true rhythm of the journey, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes rocking, sometimes still. But don't celebrate yet. The driver won't hand over the keys immediately. He needs proof you won't banish him back to the dark. The only proof is consistency. Today, anger flares. You don't suppress it. Don't lash out. Just ask, where are you from? Tomorrow, fear of abandonment rises. You don't rush to text begging, just whisper, I know you're here. I'm not running. The more you dialogue, the more you realize irrational reactions aren't irrational. They're maps. Every anger points to where your voice was stolen. Every sadness leads to the moment you learned to fake happiness. Every anxiety is a warning from the part of you that still believes, if I'm not perfect, no one will stay. And this map isn't for you to fix yourself. No one needs a new ship. You just need to understand the mechanics of the old one. When you know which throttle overheats the engine, which anchor is too heavy, which sail is torn, you're no longer surprised. You drive with the unconscious instead of being driven by it. Now you stand at the edge of the abyss. Behind is the familiar deck. Shouts of hold the wheel, clanging metal of must control, whistling wind of don't let anyone see you weak. Ahead is open space, no compass, no map, no promise of safety. Only one requirement. Let go of the shell. The shell isn't your skin. It's the persona, the mask you've worn since you learned to say, good child, good student, don't cry. It's the story you tell to be loved, I'm the strong one, need no one, fear nothing. It's the wall you built to hide the nights curled under blankets, the heartbreaks you smile through. Alan Watts laughs. You think you are the mask? Then fear losing it. But the mask can't breathe. Only when you take it off do you inhale real air. The death of the shell isn't a dramatic moment. It's thousands of small ones. The time you don't retaliate when insulted. The time you admit I'm scared instead of I'm fine. The time you sit with pain instead of rushing to blame someone. Each time, a piece flakes off. At first you panic. If the mask is gone, who will love me? Then you realize the mask was what made you lonely. When the shell cracks, you enter the refining fire. Not hellfire, but purifying fire, the kind that doesn't burn, just melts away what's fake. In that fire, you see, fear of abandonment isn't truth about you, but a survival lesson from childhood. If I'm not good, Mom will be mad. Explosive anger isn't your personality, but a suppressed scream from all the times you swallowed tears to keep the peace. Need for recognition isn't ambition, but a hole from times your achievements were dismissed, love measured by grades. The fire doesn't judge, it just illuminates. And in that light, you're no longer the wounded one or the one who must be strong. You're just present. But the fire is hot. It demands you sit still. No running for comfort. No hastily gluing the mask back. Just sit. Let the heat seep into every cell. Watts says, don't try to put out the fire. Let it cook you. Raw rice is bland. Cooked rice is fragrant. In this process, you'll meet inner death. Not physical death, but the death of the old self. The old self has names. I must be loved to exist. I must control to be safe. I must be perfect to be worthy. When these mantras dissolve, you'll pass through emptiness, a silence so deep you hear blood rushing in your ears. Don't fill the emptiness with alcohol, work, new love, or empty philosophy. Emptiness is the delivery room. In it, something new is forming. Not a better version of you, no one needs an upgrade. But the original version, the child once taught to hide tears, now allowed to cry. The adult once forced to be strong, now allowed to be weak. The human who lived to be loved, now loves without needing return. And here's the paradox. Only when you accept disintegration do you become invulnerable. Because now, there's nothing to lose. No image to protect, no story to defend. You just are, no need to prove it. Watts tells of a Zen master with a robber's knife at his throat. Go ahead and cut. I don't claim this head as my own. The robber trembles and flees, not from fear of death, but because there was no place to strike. The next part will take you out of the fire, into the dawn, after the long night, where you no longer need armor, because you are the armor, where pain still comes, but no longer leads you astray, where you live from the center, not the surface. You've walked through the fire. The ashes are still warm under your feet, but the air has changed. No more stinging smoke, just the scent of damp earth after rain. The shell has fallen. The mask has shattered. You stand there, bare, with nothing to cling to, and the strangest thing is you don't feel dead. You just feel alive, for the first time fully, without acting, without holding an image, without proving anything. This isn't a dazzling moment to snap and post online, not a state of I've awakened to brag about. This is the everyday state, as simple as brewing morning tea, hearing birds on the porch, and knowing you don't have to be okay to be allowed to exist. Alan Watts once said, when you realize there's no one to become, that's when you truly start living. Living from the center means when criticism flies at you, you hear it, feel a slight sting in your chest, but the sting doesn't swell into a storm. You know, this is an old scar being touched. It reminds me I once believed I had to be perfect. I don't believe that anymore. Then you smile, nod, and keep walking. No need to justify. No need to fight back. It means when an ex texts, I miss you, you don't rush back to fill a hole. You read, breathe deep, and reply, or don't from a place of inner fullness, not lack. It means when your boss yells at you in front of everyone, you don't shrink, don't snap back. You just look at the boss's anger, look at your fear of being belittled, and choose a response without losing yourself. You still feel pain, don't misunderstand. Dawn doesn't erase night. It just shows you pain is a guest, not the homeowner. The guest arrives, you invite them to sit, pour water, ask, what do you want to say? Then see them off without clinging. Watts tells of a Zen master in a boat on the river. Wind blows, boat tilts. Disciple panics. Master, we're going to capsize. Master smiles. Capsize, then what? The river still flows. You are the river, not the boat, not the passenger, not the wind. You are the entire movement. When you understand this, you no longer need to become someone unhurt. You are unhurt not because you don't feel, but because there's no place left for hurt to take root. And here's the final part, also the hardest, living this every day. In the morning, instead of checking your phone for praise, place your hand on your chest. Ask, what do I need today? When angry, instead of firing off a hostile text, walk for 10 minutes. Let the anger speak its piece. Then decide if it's worth responding. When sad, instead of scrolling for distraction, sit down, cry if you need, write on paper, what is this sadness about? Then burn the paper not to erase but to acknowledge. When afraid, instead of faking confidence, say the truth. I'm afraid of failing. And strangely, telling the truth makes the fear dissolve. Awareness isn't a destination, but a habit. Like brushing teeth, like breathing. You'll still meet old lovers, still face rejection, still lose things. But the difference is, you're no longer the victim of the story, you're the storyteller. One day, you'll realize you no longer need to become invulnerable, because you already are, not because you're stronger, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. Watts ended a lecture with, life is a dance. You don't dance to get somewhere. You dance because the music is playing. Now, the music is playing. Stand up. No mask, no armor, just you, with all your scars, all your laughter, all your silence. If something in you stirs, whisper, I choose to live.
Every moment spent chasing becomes a moment unseen, unlived, unappreciated. But when you realize that this very moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only enough that ever existed, something inside you softens. You no longer fight the flow. You start to dance with it. The meaning of money is in its movement. It is not meant to be hoarded, but circulated. It is energy in motion. And when you let it move, it brings life. When you freeze it, it begins to die. The same is true for joy, for love, for creativity. These things only remain alive when shared. That is why generosity has always been the mark of a truly wealthy spirit. Because generosity is not about giving away money. It is about releasing attachment. It is saying, I trust life enough to let this go. And the universe, being an echo of that same trust, often responds in kind. Real wealth does not come from possessing more, but from needing less. You become infinitely rich the moment you stop trying to compensate for your sense of lack. You realize that all this time, you were never chasing money, you were chasing yourself. You were searching for the feeling of being enough. And the moment you recognize that you already are, the chase ends. This does not mean you abandon ambition or stop working. It simply means you stop confusing effort with worth. You work not to become something, but to express what you already are. That shift, subtle as it seems, transforms everything. Suddenly, your actions feel lighter. You stop competing and start creating. You stop worrying about outcomes because you understand that what truly matters was never at stake. The real purpose of money is play, to facilitate exchange, creativity, and connection, not to define identity. When you begin to treat it as play, you participate in the great rhythm of life without losing yourself in it. You can work hard, earn much, even enjoy luxury, but you no longer confuse the mask for the face. Look around the world and you will notice that the happiest people are not necessarily those who have the most, but those who are most alive. They use money like musicians use notes, as a means of expression, not measurement. They can laugh at losses, smile through uncertainty, and still trust the unfolding of things. You may not control every rise and fall of fortune, but you can always control your relationship to it.
You can choose to see money as movement rather than meaning. You can choose to treat wealth as a guest rather than a god. The moment you stop believing that happiness lies somewhere beyond the next financial milestone, you begin to wake up. You realize that the true treasure of life is not stored in banks, but in awareness, in the ability to see beauty in what is already here. Imagine living from that space. You still earn, still plan, still invest, but you no longer suffer through it. You no longer chase freedom, you express it. Because the free person is not one who has escaped the system, but one who no longer believes it defines them. Wealth and freedom are not opposites. They only appear that way when you forget who you are. When you remember, everything becomes simple. You earn when you need to, you rest when you can, and you allow life to unfold in its rhythm. And then, quite mysteriously, abundance finds its way back to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. You stopped clutching at life and started trusting it. The fool chases freedom through control. The wise simply realize that control was never needed. And in that realization, you discover the most profound truth of all. You were never meant to be rich. You were meant to be free. They guide your choices, shape your dreams, and limit your joy. But fear is not truth. It is imagination without awareness. The mind projects its doubts into the future, forgetting that the present moment contains no threat. When you bring awareness back to now, fear dissolves like mist in sunlight. And finally, there is the place of achievement, the grand illusion that you must earn your right to exist. From childhood, you were taught that success is the price of worthiness. You were told that meaning is found in doing more, having more, becoming more. But this endless striving leaves you exhausted and hollow. For every mountain you climb, another appears. Every goal achieved brings only temporary satisfaction before the next desire takes its place. You cannot reach peace through achievement because peace was never missing. It was simply forgotten beneath the noise of becoming. When you live in these places long enough, you begin to forget that they are not who you are. You start to believe that comparison, control, and fear are the normal conditions of life. You even take pride in your suffering, calling it ambition or discipline. But there comes a moment, sometimes in exhaustion, sometimes in silence, when something within you whispers, there must be more than this. That whisper is the beginning of awakening. It is the voice of the true self calling you home. The journey back to your real nature does not begin by running from these places, but by seeing them clearly. Seeing the illusion is already freedom from it. The one who observes comparison is not comparing. The one who sees fear is not afraid. The awareness that witnesses the storm is not the storm itself. This is the essence of awakening. Not to become something new, but to remember what was never lost. As long as you identify with what changes, you will suffer with every change. But when you rest as the awareness behind it, you find a peace that cannot be shaken. The world continues to move. The body continues to age. The stories continue to unfold. Yet there is a stillness that remains untouched. That stillness is your true nature. It is not a belief or a philosophy. It is the very ground of your being. And when you begin to live from that awareness, something extraordinary happens. The comparisons lose their power. The fears lose their grip. The noise of the world softens into background music. You move through life not as someone trying to win, but as someone who has already arrived. You act, but without anxiety. You care, but without attachment. You love, but without possession. This is what it means to remember yourself. Most people will never take that step. They will continue to chase and collect and compare until their final breath. But you, if you are listening closely, may already sense that another way exists. Not a path that you must find, but one that reveals itself when you stop running. The moment you stop trying to become, you return to being.
And there, in that simple presence, you rediscover the truth you had been searching for in every corner of the world. Your true self was never hidden. It was only overlooked. Like the silence behind every sound, it was there all along, waiting for you to remember. There comes a time when you grow tired of your own struggle, not because you've given up, but because you've finally seen through the illusion that there was ever something to win. You begin to notice that every chase ends in the same place. Every success fades into the next desire, and every fear eventually dissolves into the air it came from. And in that quiet realization, something begins to awaken. You start to sense that freedom is not a matter of fixing life, but of seeing it clearly. When you see clearly, you no longer need to escape the world. You simply stop mistaking the noise for yourself. The mind will still produce thoughts, emotions will still rise and fall, but the difference is that you no longer identify with them. You begin to live from a deeper stillness, an inner clarity that watches the play of life without being carried away by it. Most people believe awakening is about adding something: more knowledge, more practice, more light, but true awakening is the opposite. It is a gentle undoing, a falling away of everything that is not you. You begin to shed the unnecessary, not through effort, but through recognition. Like mist burned away by the sun, illusion fades the moment it's seen for what it is. You realize that you were never the restless seeker trying to become something more. You were the space in which the seeking was happening. You were the quiet awareness watching the entire performance unfold. Once this begins to dawn in you, the world starts to feel lighter. You no longer walk through life as if it were a battlefield. You move as if life were music, unpredictable, fluid, alive. You begin to understand that harmony was never about control, but about listening. The same way a musician must surrender to the rhythm, you learn to trust the natural movement of your own existence. The mind, of course, will resist this. It will say, if I stop striving, I'll fall behind. If I stop controlling, everything will collapse. But this fear is built on misunderstanding. It assumes that you are the one holding life together. In truth, life is holding you. The same intelligence that turns stars, that breathes your lungs, that beats your heart without your permission, that is what's living you. To fight against it is to struggle against your own nature. When you allow life to flow through you rather than trying to command it, something miraculous happens. Effort becomes grace. Work becomes play. Even pain becomes a form of transformation. You begin to see that everything that once felt like punishment was only life trying to teach you how to let go. The world becomes your mirror. Wherever you look, you see reflections of the self you used to believe you were. But instead of reacting, you begin to smile. You realize that everyone is caught in the same dream, trying to protect the same illusions. And compassion arises not as an obligation, but as a natural understanding. You no longer need to change people. You see that they, too, are being guided home in their own time. There's a beautiful simplicity that returns to your existence. You no longer need grand philosophies or complex practices. Presence itself becomes your teacher. When you drink tea, you taste life in the tea. When you walk, you feel the ground as part of yourself. When you breathe, you realize the air entering your lungs has already belonged to countless others before you. Everything begins to shimmer with the same aliveness that once seemed hidden. You discover that joy was never something to achieve, it was what remained when striving stopped. The same world that once felt chaotic now feels sacred, because you are no longer separate from it. You are not a visitor in this universe. You are the universe momentarily playing the role of a person. Many people spend their whole lives trying to find meaning. They ask, why am I here? But the question itself is the confusion. You are not here to find meaning. You are here to experience being. Meaning is not something given to you by the world. It arises naturally when you are present. When you are fully here, life takes care of itself. You stop living in the past and future because you see how unreal they are. The past is memory, the future is imagination, and neither can ever be touched. The only place life actually exists is now. This moment, simple and ordinary as it may seem, contains everything. All the beauty, all the mystery, all the peace you were searching for has been waiting here all along. When you live from this awareness, even the so-called dangerous places lose their power. Comparison becomes gratitude because you finally see that everyone's path is their own. Control becomes surrender because you trust the intelligence behind every unfolding. Identity becomes play because you know you are not the mask but the one wearing it. Distraction turns into wonder because every sound and sight becomes a reminder of your own presence. Perfection becomes unnecessary because you realize that the world was never broken. Fear turns into curiosity because what once seemed threatening now becomes an invitation to awaken. And achievement becomes expression, a joyful way of participating in life rather than a desperate attempt to justify your existence. When you live like this, there is no conflict between being and doing. You can act in the world without losing yourself in it. You can work, create, build, and care. But your peace no longer depends on results. You are free in success and free in failure because both are seen as passing clouds in the same vast sky of awareness. People sometimes ask, if I stop chasing, won't I lose motivation? But true motivation doesn't come from fear or lack. It comes from love. When you love something, you do it naturally. You don't have to force yourself to create, to explore, to share. Life moves through you as inspiration, not obligation. That is what it means to live freely. And as you rest more deeply in that state, gratitude begins to bloom. You start to see the gift in everything, even in loss, even in uncertainty. Because you realize that life's impermanence is not a problem to be solved, but a miracle to be witnessed. Every ending makes room for another beginning. Every change reminds you that nothing was ever meant to be held forever. In that realization, the world no longer frightens you. You can stand in the middle of chaos and remain still inside. You can watch the rise and fall of fortune and not lose your balance. You can experience pain and not close your heart. This is the strength that arises from awakening, a strength that looks soft to the world but is unbreakable within. When the ego finally quiets, you discover that what remains is love. Not sentimental love, not the love that comes and goes, but the boundless love of awareness itself, the recognition that everything you see, everything you feel, is made of the same essence as you. And when you live from that realization, every encounter becomes sacred. Every person becomes a reflection of yourself. Every breath feels like a prayer. In the end, there is nowhere to go. No goal left to chase. No trap left to escape. You see that the whole journey was a circle leading you back to the present moment. Back to the simple truth that you are, and that is enough. Freedom was never about breaking chains, but about realizing they were never real. And when you finally see that, you smile. You smile because you understand what all the teachers, sages, and poets were trying to tell you. That the self you were trying so hard to find was the one that had been listening all along. You were never lost. You were simply dreaming. And now, you are awake.
You see, we spend most of our lives trying to get money, but very few ever stop to ask why they want it in the first place. We chase money as though it's oxygen, as though without it, we cannot live, breathe, or be happy. But have you noticed that the more desperate you are for it, the more it seems to run away? And when you finally stop running, when you stop chasing, it often seems to find its way to you effortlessly, like a bird that lands quietly on your shoulder when you're still. It's quite a curious thing. You want money because you want freedom, but in the chase for money, you often lose the very freedom you were seeking. You become anxious, impatient, and trapped by your own desire. You become like a man digging for water in the desert who forgets that the oasis was already inside him. Now, I want to tell you a secret that life has been whispering to you all along. The money comes faster when you stop needing it to come. When you stop begging the universe with the vibration of lack and begin to live as though you already possess abundance, everything begins to flow differently. Because reality, my dear friend, is not responding to your words. It is responding to your state of being. When you say, I want more money, what you are really declaring is, I don't have enough. And that feeling, that inner frequency, is what the world mirrors back to you. The universe is not your servant. It is your reflection. And whatever you feel most strongly becomes the signal it sends right back. I remember once saying that desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. You see, that is the trap when you tie your joy, your sense of self, your peace of mind to the arrival of money. You postpone happiness indefinitely. You wait for the outside world to change before you permit yourself to feel whole inside. But reality does not work that way. Reality rearranges itself around the vibration you are embodying. Now, the moment you say, I will be happy when I have money, you are broadcasting to existence that you are not yet happy. And existence simply reflects that. It will keep giving you situations that confirm your belief. This is why people stay poor, not because of a lack of effort, but because of the emotional atmosphere they live in, the inner weather they keep repeating each day. But imagine for a moment if you reversed it. What if you decided to feel abundant before the money comes? What if you walked through life with the vibration of someone who already has more than enough? What if you practiced gratitude not as a trick to get something, but as a state of genuine recognition that life itself is already full? Here's the paradox. The moment you stop using gratitude to manipulate the future, it actually begins to change. When you are no longer thanking the universe because you want it to do something for you, and instead thank it because you realize it already has, you step into the creative flow that allows more to come easily. Most people think they must do something to attract abundance. But the real secret is not in the doing, it's in the being. When your inner world is aligned with wealth, when you think, feel, and act like a person who already has it, is inevitable that your outer world will rearrange to reflect that. Because what you truly are inside cannot help but radiate outward. Think of it this way. You do not get money by running after it, just as you do not catch your own shadow by chasing it. You align with the light, and the shadow follows naturally. Money is the same. It is the shadow of your inner vibration. It follows the light of your consciousness. And the brighter that light, the faster the shadow moves to you. You see, money is not a reward from life. It is an expression of energy, a symbol of exchange, an extension of flow. When you are in a state of openness, creativity, and service, when you are genuinely giving your energy to life in a joyful way, money flows naturally as part of that current. But when you contract, when you tighten up with fear or lack, you dam the river. You block the current that was trying to bring you more. And this is the great irony of abundance. The tighter you hold on to it, the less you have. The more you let go, the more you receive. When you understand this, you begin to see why some people seem to magnetize wealth effortlessly. It's not that they are more intelligent, or luckier, or blessed by fate. It's that they have stopped resisting life. They have stopped sending out signals of fear and scarcity. They are not trying to get, they are allowing themselves to be. Now, what does this mean in practical terms? It means that if you wish for money to come faster, you must stop worshipping it. You must stop seeing it as your savior. You must begin to see it for what it truly is, an echo of your inner abundance, a reflection of your relationship with yourself. Ask yourself, how do I feel when I think about money? If you feel tense, anxious, impatient, or guilty, those are the vibrations you are feeding into the field. That is the emotional music you are playing to the universe. And the universe always dances to your tune. If your song is one of desperation, it will send you experiences that match desperation. If your song is one of ease, gratitude, and joy, then it will send you experiences that match that too. So instead of asking, how can I get more money? Ask, how can I feel more abundant right now? Because that feeling is the real currency. Money follows the feeling, not the other way around. You don't wait for a heater to get warm before turning it on. You generate the warmth first. The same applies here. You don't wait for external wealth to create internal abundance. You create the inner abundance, and the external wealth appears as a consequence. Now, the modern mind finds this deeply uncomfortable because we've been conditioned to believe that hard work and struggle are the only valid ways to succeed. We are taught to grind, to compete, to strive. But the truth is, effort without alignment is wasted energy. You can row a boat tirelessly, but if it's facing the wrong direction, you'll never reach your destination. When you are aligned internally, when your thoughts, emotions, and actions are coherent, things begin to move swiftly, almost magically. Doors open without effort. Opportunities appear where none existed. People show up at the right moment. You call it coincidence, but it's simply coherence at work. The universe is a field of infinite intelligence, responding to frequency. Every thought, every emotion, every belief you hold emits a vibration. When your vibration says, I am abundant, the field mirrors it with situations that confirm that truth. But when your vibration says, I'm lacking, it reflects lack. You cannot deceive the universe. It doesn't listen to your words. It reads your energy. And so, money is not something you earn as much as something you allow. It comes through you, not to you. It flows through the channels of your belief, your gratitude, your openness, and your creativity. It comes faster when you stop pushing it away with resistance and begin to trust that it is part of the same flow that gives breath, sunlight, and life itself. When you truly grasp this, you'll understand why so many spiritual teachers speak about surrender not as a form of passivity, but as a deep act of trust. To surrender is not to sit and do nothing. It is to stop forcing things to happen. It is to stop resisting the natural rhythm of life. It is to know that you are already connected to everything you need, and that your only task is to align with it internally. You cannot attract abundance from a state of frustration. You cannot call in wealth from a vibration of need, because in that vibration, you are telling the universe that you are separate from abundance, and so you remain so. But when you relax, when you breathe deeply and truly feel that life itself supports you, money begins to flow toward you, not as a bribe, not as a prize, but as a natural expression of your trust. So, the doing that brings money faster is not doing in the conventional sense. It is not about hustling harder, or making more lists, or pushing yourself into exhaustion. It is the inner work, the aligning of your state with the energy of abundance. It's the silent practice of tuning your mind and emotions until they sing in harmony with prosperity. You don't need to manipulate the world. You need to harmonize with it. When you do, the world responds with synchronicity, grace, and ease. Now, let's talk about something even deeper, the energy behind the intention. Why do you want money? Truly? Most people say because I want to feel free or I want to feel safe. But freedom and safety are not things that come after money. They are the states that allow money to arrive. When you feel free now, the vibration of freedom attracts experiences that match it, including financial opportunities. When you feel safe now, the vibration of safety magnetizes circumstances that confirm your safety, including money. So you must become the thing you wish to attract long before it appears. This is the mystical law of resonance, the same law that governs sound, music, and even the orbits of planets. If you listen to an orchestra, you'll notice that every instrument plays in harmony when tuned to the same frequency. Life operates the same way. When you tune your consciousness to the frequency of wealth through gratitude, trust, and joy, everything around you begins to harmonize. People, events, and ideas tune themselves to your vibration, and suddenly, what once seemed impossible becomes effortless. But if your inner world is dissonant, if one part of you believes in abundance while another part clings to fear, you create interference. You send mixed signals to the field, and the universe does not know which one to reflect. That's why self-awareness is the foundation of manifestation. You must become aware of the stories you tell yourself about money, the fears you inherited, the limitations you absorbed, the beliefs that no longer serve you. Because your beliefs are not truths. They are choices you've repeated so often that they've hardened into reality. But the moment you see them clearly, they begin to dissolve. And in their place, new possibilities emerge. When you begin to observe your relationship with money without judgment, something remarkable happens. You start to see that the anxiety, the grasping, the need to control, none of it is truly about the money itself. It's about what you believe money will fix. Somewhere deep within, you've been taught that money is the bridge between where you are and the life you want. But the truth is much gentler, much more profound. The bridge is your consciousness itself. If your consciousness is rooted in fear, you could win the lottery tomorrow and still feel unsafe. You could have millions in your account and yet feel poor inside. You'd still check your balance, still worry about losing it, still carry that faint vibration of not enough. Because wealth is not the amount of money you have, it's the amount of peace you feel when you have it. So what truly brings the money faster? Paradoxically, it is the release of the need for it. It is the moment when you realize that money was never the goal. It was only the mirror reflecting how deeply you trust life. When you trust completely, you become like the ocean that never worries whether it will receive another wave. You simply exist in the rhythm of give and take, ebb and flow. Consider how nature operates. The tree doesn't demand sunlight. It allows the sun to reach it. The river doesn't force its current. It simply flows according to gravity. The flower doesn't chase the bee. It blooms. And the bee arrives naturally. Yet humans, with all their cleverness, have managed to complicate the very principle of abundance. We've turned life into a contest. And in that contest, we've forgotten how to receive. To receive is not an act of laziness. It is an act of openness. And that openness is born of trust. When you trust that life supports you, you are no longer trying to force things into existence. You become receptive to the infinite possibilities already surrounding you. You stop narrowing your vision to the single path you believe will make you rich, and instead begin to see the countless other ways abundance can reach you. I once said that the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious, yet everyone rushes around in a panic, as though it were necessary to achieve something beyond that. This panic is the same one that makes you chase money. But if you pause, just pause and truly see where you are, you may notice that life is already taking care of you in thousands of invisible ways. The breath entering your lungs, the sunlight warming your skin, the way your body repairs itself without your command. These are all signs that abundance is already happening, here and now. When you feel that deeply, gratitude arises naturally. Not as a mental exercise, but as a spontaneous recognition of how miraculous it all is. And in that recognition, your vibration shifts. The desperate current of I need softens into I am provided for. The clenched fist opens, and suddenly the river of prosperity can flow again. So, if you wish to make money come faster, stop thinking of it as something outside of yourself. Begin to treat every thought, every emotion, every action as a form of energetic currency. Ask yourself, what am I investing my energy in today? Are you spending it on worry, on comparison, on self-doubt? Or are you investing it in creativity and generosity and trust? Because whatever you give your attention to grows. Money follows energy, and energy follows attention. That is the secret that the mystics and the physicists both agree upon. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a participant in creation. Now, let's explore a simple shift that can transform your relationship with money almost overnight. Instead of asking, how can I get more? Ask, how can I give more? Not give more out of guilt, but out of abundance. Not because you feel obligated, but because giving affirms that you have more than enough. When you give freely, whether it's your time, your kindness, your talent, or your resources, you are declaring to the universe, I am abundant. And the universe, always echoing your state, responds in kind. It cannot help but fill the space you have opened. You become a conduit rather than a container, and the flow accelerates through you. But remember, giving must come from authenticity, not performance. If you give with the hidden hope that it will make you rich, the vibration of need still dominates, and the current remains slow. But if you give because you truly feel rich already, that energy becomes magnetic. People, opportunities, and ideas are drawn to that field of genuine abundance. Have you noticed how easy it is to trust people who are at peace with themselves? You can feel it even before they speak. Their presence radiates calm, their words carry weight, and their actions flow effortlessly. That is what money responds to. It flows toward coherence, confidence, and ease. It avoids confusion, desperation, and fear. So, your task is not to convince money to come. It is to become the kind of person money enjoys being around. You do this through presence, through awareness, through the simple act of bringing yourself back again and again to the truth that everything you need is already here in potential form. When you act from that knowing, your energy field becomes clear. You stop vibrating in two directions at once. You stop saying, I believe I can be wealthy, while secretly fearing that you can't. You begin to live from the state of I already am. That's when the miracles begin, not because the universe suddenly starts paying attention to you, but because you finally start paying attention to the universe. Now, let me tell you a small story, one that carries within it the essence of this whole teaching. There was once a man who lived in a small village. He worked tirelessly every day, hoping to save enough to build a better life. He counted his coins carefully, feared spending them, and went to sleep each night worrying that they would vanish. One day, a wise traveler passed through the village and said to him, "Why do you worry so much? The field you work in is full of gold." The man laughed. "Nonsense," he said. "I've worked that field for 20 years. There's only dirt and sweat in it." The traveler smiled. "Look again," he said. "Not with your eyes, but with your heart." The man was puzzled, but that night he sat quietly under the stars, and for the first time in years, he stopped worrying. He felt the cool wind, the hum of crickets, the quiet pulse of life around him. Something inside him softened. And the next morning, when he returned to the field, he noticed things he'd never seen before: the richness of the soil, the patterns of light, the gentle rhythm of the earth. He began to work differently, no longer with tension, but with joy. And within a year, his crops multiplied beyond measure. He realized then that the field had always been full of gold. It was his own vision that had been poor. You see, wealth does not come from outside. It comes through perception. When your eyes change, your world changes. And so, perhaps the greatest practice for attracting money faster is not affirmations, not strategy, not even meditation in the usual sense. It is awareness. Awareness of your own inner dialogue, awareness of the stories you tell about scarcity and struggle. When you see them clearly, you stop feeding them with belief. And in that very moment, your vibration shifts. Some people ask, "But Alan, if I stop worrying, if I stop caring so much about money, won't I become lazy? Won't I stop trying?" To that I say, no, you will finally begin living. For what we call laziness is often just the absence of fear. When you stop working out of fear, you begin creating out of love. You become more efficient, more inspired, and far more magnetic. Because action born of joy is infinitely more powerful than action born of worry. So here's what I suggest. Begin every morning with a moment of quiet acknowledgement. Before you look at your phone, before you check your bank account, close your eyes and say softly to yourself, "I am supported by life. I am connected to abundance. I am already enough." Feel it not as a mantra to fix something, but as a truth that is already here. Let that feeling expand in your chest until it fills your body. Then go about your day as if this were true. Spend money with joy, not fear. Speak about your goals with ease, not anxiety. Notice the small gifts life brings: a kind word, a smile, a new idea, and treat them as signs that abundance is flowing. Because it is. You will find that when you stop chasing, things begin to chase you. The phone rings, opportunities appear, coincidences multiply. This is not superstition, it is physics. The vibration you emit shapes the field around you. And when that vibration says, "I already have," the universe replies, "Indeed you do." Understand, though, that this is not a one-time trick. It is a way of being. You must keep returning to it every time your old conditioning tries to pull you back into fear. Every time you notice yourself tightening, judging, or doubting, simply pause. Take a breath. Remember the truth. Money is not your source. Life is. And life is infinite. As this awareness deepens, something even more extraordinary begins to happen. You start to see that what you really desired was never the money itself. It was expansion, expression, and experience. Money was just one of the ways life could deliver that. Once you realize that, the universe becomes infinitely creative in how it supports you. Sometimes the abundance comes as money. Sometimes it comes as opportunity, love, or insight. But it always comes. And in that realization, you are free. Because when you are no longer dependent on one form of abundance, you open yourself to all of them. You stop being a beggar at the door of life and remember that you are, in fact, life itself, endless, expressive, abundant. So the money comes faster by doing this, by being what you seek, by letting go of the constant effort to acquire and instead embody the state of already having, by relaxing into the present moment and trusting that life is intelligent enough to arrange itself on your behalf. You don't attract wealth by chasing wealth. You attract it by living richly rich in thought, in gratitude, in giving, in trust. And when you live that way, the external wealth has no choice but to match it. Remember, life does not reward desperation, it mirrors vibration. So practice joy now. Practice generosity now. Practice the feeling of abundance now. And soon, you will find that the money was never late. It was simply waiting for you to arrive at the right frequency. Because in the end, abundance is not something you pursue, it is what you are. And when you realize that fully, you'll laugh, as I often do, at the cosmic joke of it all, that you were never trying to get money. You were only trying to remember that you already had everything you needed to let it flow. Why is it that so many people who are spiritually sensitive, who seem to have this inner knowing, this capacity for awareness, were born into families that were, shall we say, less than ideal? Families that were dysfunctional, toxic, painful. And you might think, well, if the universe is so wise, if there's some kind of intelligence behind all this, why would it put these sensitive souls into such difficult circumstances? But what if I told you that this is not a mistake? What if the very thing you've been cursing, the very situation you've been trying to run from your entire life, is actually the most important, not because suffering is noble, but because sometimes the hardest soil produces the strongest trees. See, we have this notion that spiritual awakening should come through pleasant experiences, through meditation retreats, through reading wise books, through sitting quietly in beautiful gardens. And yes, these things can help. But the real awakening, the kind that shakes you to your bones, often comes through fire. It comes through difficulty. It comes through having everything you thought you needed stripped away until all that remains is what you truly are. Think about it this way. If you were born into a perfectly harmonious family, where everyone was kind and understanding, where love flowed freely and naturally, would you ever question anything? Would you ever look deeper? Would you ever have to develop that inner strength, that capacity to see through illusion? Probably not. You'd simply flow along with the current, never knowing there was anything else. But a toxic family, a dysfunctional family, they give you something else entirely. They give you friction. They give you problems that cannot be solved by ordinary means. They give you situations where you cannot simply go along with what everyone else is doing, because what everyone else is doing is clearly mad. And in that friction, in that impossibility, something begins to wake up. Let me put it to you another way. When a grain of sand gets into an oyster, it irritates, it hurts. The oyster cannot simply eject it. So what does the oyster do? It begins to coat the grain of sand with layers of nacre, slowly, patiently, and eventually that irritating grain becomes a pearl. The most beautiful thing the oyster creates comes from the thing that hurt it most. Your toxic family was the grain of sand. And you, through all your struggles, through all your pain, through all those years of trying to understand why they were the way they were, you've been creating. You've been developing something that people born into easy circumstances never have to develop. Wisdom. Real wisdom. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind that comes from having to figure out how to survive when everything around you is chaos. But here's where it gets really interesting. A toxic family doesn't just create problems. It creates a very specific kind of problem. It creates confusion about love. And this, strange as it sounds, is the gateway to awakening. You see, most people never question what love is. They simply accept whatever their family taught them. If their family was loving, they assume that's what love looks like. If their family was distant, they assume love is supposed to be distant. They never have to think about it. They never have to examine it. They simply repeat the pattern. But when you're born into a toxic family, you cannot do this. The pattern is so obviously broken that you cannot simply repeat it. You might try it first. Many do, but eventually something in you rebels. Something in you says, no, this isn't right. This isn't what love is supposed to be. And in that moment of rebellion, in that refusal to accept the pattern, you've taken the first step toward awakening, because now you must figure out for yourself what love actually is. You cannot rely on what you were taught. You cannot trust the programming. You have to go deeper. You have to look within. You have to discover what love means when it's not mixed up with manipulation, with control, with conditions, with all the garbage your family attached to it. Not to suffer, though there was suffering. Not to be damaged, though there was damage. But to be forced to wake up, to be forced to question, to be forced to look deeper than most people ever have to look. Now, I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean the pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean what happened to you was okay. It doesn't mean you should feel grateful for abuse or neglect or whatever it was your family did. That would be missing the point entirely. The pain was real. The damage was real. What happened to you was not right. But here's the thing about reality. It doesn't care about our ideas of right and wrong. A tree doesn't grow straight by being kept in a greenhouse. It grows straight by being bent by the wind, by having to reach for the light, by having to develop deep roots to keep from being blown over. The wind is not kind. The wind is just wind. But without the wind, the tree would never develop strength. Your family was the wind. And you, whether you know it or not, have been developing roots that go very deep. Roots that most people never have to grow. And those roots, that depth, that's what makes you capable of understanding things that others cannot understand. Think about the people you know who had easy childhoods. Pleasant, comfortable, everything handed to them. What are they like now? I'm not saying they're bad people. But often, they have a certain shallowness to them, don't they? A certain inability to grasp the darker, deeper aspects of life. They live on the surface because they've never had to go beneath it. They believe in fairy tales because their life has been something of a fairy tale. But you cannot believe in fairy tales. You've seen behind the curtain. You know that families can be cruel, that parents can be selfish, that love can be twisted into something ugly. And while this knowledge was painful to acquire, it has made you real in a way that protected people never become. You've been stripped of illusions. And while most people spend their entire lives clinging to illusions, you don't have that luxury. You had to see things as they actually are. And seeing things as they actually are, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. Now let's talk about something else. Something that might make you uncomfortable. Because here's a truth that's hard to accept. Your family wasn't just toxic to you. They were toxic because they were wounded. They were wounded because their parents were wounded. And their parents were wounded because their parents were wounded. It goes back and back and back, generation after generation, each one passing on the pain they received because they didn't know how to do anything else. You are the culmination of all that pain. All those generations of wounds, they all flowed into you. And you were the one who finally said, this stops here. You were the one who finally looked at the pattern and said, no more. I will not pass this on. I will not continue this cycle. And that is why you're different. That is why you were chosen, if you want to use that word. Not because you're special in some ego sense, but because your soul was strong enough to say, I will carry this weight. I will be the one who breaks the chain. Think about what that means. Your family, as toxic as they were not your enemies. They were your teachers. Terrible teachers, yes. Teachers who taught through pain rather than love. But teachers nonetheless. They showed you exactly what not to do. They showed you exactly what happens when people don't wake up, when they don't question, when they simply repeat the patterns they inherited. And by showing you what not to do, they forced you to figure out what to do. They forced you to become conscious. They forced you to choose. Because you see, that's the real gift. Choice. Most people never have to choose how to be. They simply are what their family made them. They're automatons, robots, running on programming they never questioned. But you had to choose. You had to consciously decide what kind of person you wanted to be. You had to consciously decide what you believed love was. You had to consciously decide what values you would hold, what kind of relationships you would have, what kind of life you would build. Nothing was automatic, nothing was given. Everything had to be chosen. And in that choosing, in that constant, difficult work of choosing, you became awake. You became conscious. You became, in the truest sense, yourself. Not what your family wanted you to be, not what society expected you to be, but what you, in your deepest knowing, chose to be. Now here's where people often get confused. They think awakening means being happy all the time, being peaceful all the time, being detached from everything. But that's not awakening. That's just another kind of sleep, another kind of escape. Real awakening means seeing clearly. It means understanding the patterns. It means recognizing that your family's behavior was not about you. It was never about you. It was about them, their wounds, their pain, their inability to love, because they had never been loved properly themselves. And when you see this, really see it, something extraordinary is happening. The anger begins to dissolve. Not because you force it to, not because you think you should forgive, but because you finally understand. You understand that they were not villains. They were wounded people acting out their wounds, unable to do anything else because no one ever showed them another way. Does this mean you have to have a relationship with them? No. Does this mean you have to trust them? Absolutely not. Does this mean you have to subject yourself to their toxicity? Not at all. Understanding is not the same as allowing abuse. Compassion is not the same as being a doormat. You can understand someone completely and still choose to stay away from them. You can have compassion for their wounds and still protect yourself from their behavior. These are not contradictions. These are simply different levels of understanding. The truly awakened person knows this. They know that protecting yourself is not the same as hating. They know that setting boundaries is not the same as being cruel. They know that you can wish someone well while also wishing them well from a great distance. And this is the freedom that comes from having been born into a toxic family. You learn to love without attachment. You learn to care without being consumed. You learn to see people clearly without judgment. Because you've had to do all these things with your own family. People from healthy families, they often struggle with this. They feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel selfish for prioritizing their own needs. They confuse love with sacrifice, with enduring pain, with putting up with behavior that damages them. Because that's what they were taught. But you learned a different lesson. You learned that real love includes boundaries. That real love sometimes means saying no. That real love sometimes means walking away. Not with anger, not with hatred, but simply with the clear understanding that this situation is not good for you, and you have every right to choose situations that are. This is spiritual maturity. This is what most people spend lifetimes trying to learn. And you learned it early because you had no choice. Your family gave you an advanced course in what love is not. And in learning that, you also learned what love is. Let me share something with you. The most spiritually awake people I've ever known, they all had difficult childhoods. All of them. And for years I wondered why. Why does suffering seem to be the common denominator in awakening? And then I realized it's not about the suffering, it's about the questioning that suffering produces. When life is easy, you don't question. You don't have to. But when life is hard, when it doesn't make sense, when the people who are supposed to love you hurt you instead, you start asking the big questions. Why am I here? What is this all about? What is real and what is illusion? These questions, these are the questions that lead to awakening. Your toxic family pushed you to ask these questions early. They pushed you to look for meaning in a situation that seemed meaningless. They pushed you to find love in yourself because you couldn't find it in them. They pushed you to develop an inner life because the outer life was too painful. And in developing that inner life, in turning inward because the outer world was so harsh, you found something most people never find. You found your true self, not the self your family wanted you to be, not the self society expected you to be, but the self you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the wounds, beneath all the stories. This self, this true self, it was always there. But most people never discover it because they never have to look for it. They're too busy living on the surface, too busy being who everyone expects them to be. But you had to dig deep because the surface was unbearable. And in digging deep, you struck gold. Now here's the final piece of this understanding. Your awakening is not just for you. It's for everyone. It's for your family, even though they may never acknowledge it. It's for the generations that came before you, because in healing yourself, you heal the ancestral line. And it's for the generations that will come after you, because you've broken the pattern, you've stopped the cycle. You've said, this madness ends with me. This is what it means to be spiritually awake. It's not about being better than others. It's not about being special. It's about being awake enough to see the patterns, strong enough to break them, and brave enough to choose differently even when it's difficult. Your toxic family was the darkness that forced you to find your own light. They were the problem that forced you to become the solution. They were the question that forced you to find the answer. And the answer you found, the light you discovered, it's not just for you. So yes, being born into a toxic family is a gift. Not because the toxicity was good, but because it forced you to become who you really are. It forced you to wake up when you might have slept through your entire life. It forced you to question when you might have simply accepted. It forced you to choose when you might have simply followed. And now, having done all that work, having climbed that mountain, having discovered that light within yourself, you stand as proof that transformation is possible, that breaking cycles is possible, that awakening is possible. Not despite the difficulties, but because of them. This is the great gift. This is why you were placed exactly where you were placed. Not to suffer, but to awaken. Not to be broken.
You know, there's a peculiar kind of exhaustion that settles into a person, and it has nothing to do with how much sleep you've had or how hard you've worked during the day. It's deeper than that. It's the exhaustion that comes from looking at your life, at all the things you do, all the things you're supposed to care about, and finding yourself asking that most dangerous of questions. What's the point of any of this? Now, this isn't a question that announces itself with trumpets. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic crisis, though sometimes it can. More often, it seeps in quietly, like water finding its way through the smallest cracks. You're going through your routine, doing what you've always done, and suddenly you notice that the meaning has leaked out of everything. The things that used to matter, the goals that used to pull you forward, they're still there, but they've become strangely weightless, hollow. You go through the motions because, well, what else would you do? But the felt sense of purpose, that vital energy that makes it all seem worthwhile, has simply evaporated. And here's what makes it so disorienting. You look around and everyone else seems to be managing just fine. They're excited about their projects, their relationships, their plans for the future, They talk about their goals with genuine enthusiasm, as if these things really matter, as if they've found some secret you somehow missed. And you wonder, am I broken? Have I seen through something I wasn't supposed to see through? Or have I simply fallen into some kind of depression, some chemical imbalance that's stolen my ability to care? The feeling often starts with the big things. You think about your career, and you realize you're climbing a ladder that doesn't actually lead anywhere you want to go. Or perhaps it does lead somewhere. But when you imagine arriving at that destination, you can't find any real satisfaction in the image. You'll have the title, the salary, the recognition, and then what? More of the same, just at a higher altitude. You see your colleagues who've made it to where you're heading, and they don't seem any more fulfilled than you are. They've just gotten better at hiding it. Or perhaps they've stopped asking the question altogether. Then it spreads to the smaller things, the daily activities that are supposed to add texture and meaning to life. Hobbies feel like elaborate distractions. Entertainment becomes a way to fill time rather than something genuinely enjoyable. Even relationships can start to feel like performances, roles you're playing, because that's what people do. You love your family, your friends, but there's this strange distance, as if you're watching yourself interact with them from somewhere far away, going through the appropriate emotional responses without really feeling them fully. And the future, the future becomes particularly problematic because our entire lives are organized around the future, aren't they? We're always working towards something, saving for something, preparing for something. But when everything feels pointless, the future collapses into an endless repetition of the same empty present. You'll wake up tomorrow, go through your routine, have your experiences, go to sleep, and then do it all again and again and again. For what? To survive so you can continue surviving? To be happy when happiness itself has started to feel like just another item on an impossible checklist? Now, when this feeling arrives, people typically respond in one of several ways, and none of them quite work.
Before we continue, many of you have been asking for something longer, something with actual practices you can use in daily life. So check out the 3-hour audiobook that takes everything we explore in these videos and gives you the tools to actually work with it. Because here's the thing, intellectual understanding without practical application just keeps you spinning in your head. You need both, the insight and the practice, the philosophy and the daily work that makes it real. This audiobook gives you that. 3 hours of deep wisdom with practices built in, so you're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. If you're serious about changing how you experience your life, the link is in the description below. Now, let's continue.
The first response is to try harder. You think, well, perhaps I just need to find the right goal, the right purpose. So you look around for something that might fill this void. Maybe it's a new career path, something more meaningful, more aligned with your values. Maybe it's a creative project, something that will express your authentic self. Maybe it's a relationship, a person who will make everything feel worthwhile again. Or perhaps it's a cause, something bigger than yourself that you can dedicate your energy to. And so you pursue these things with a kind of desperate intensity. You throw yourself into the new job, the new hobby, the new relationship. And for a while, it works. There's excitement, novelty, the feeling that, yes, this is it, I found what was missing. But then, slowly or suddenly, that feeling fades. The new job becomes just another job. The creative project becomes another obligation. The relationship settles into routine. The cause reveals its limitations and contradictions. And you're back where you started, only now with the added burden of knowing that even when you find what you're looking for, it doesn't actually solve the problem. The second response is to try to think your way out of it. You read philosophy, psychology, self-help books. You're looking for the right perspective, the right framework that will make everything make sense again. And there's some value in this, certainly. Understanding can be helpful. But you notice something peculiar happens. You can understand intellectually that life has meaning. You can follow the arguments, agree with the conclusions, and yet the feeling of pointlessness remains untouched. It's as if there are two separate tracks running in you. One track knows all the right answers, can articulate why life matters, why your actions have significance. The other track, the one you actually live from, remains unconvinced, unmoved. Some people try to simply override the feeling. They commit to a philosophy or a belief system that tells them what matters, and they force themselves to care about those things. They create structure, discipline, routines. They tell themselves that meaning is something you create through commitment and action, not something you feel. And this can work for a time. You can function quite well, actually, by simply deciding that certain things matter and acting accordingly, regardless of how you feel about it. But there's an exhaustion in this approach, isn't there? A constant effort of will. And every now and then, in the quiet moments, the question returns, but why am I doing this? What's the point of forcing myself to care about things I don't actually care about? Then there's the root of distraction, which is perhaps the most common response of all. You keep yourself busy, entertained, stimulated. You fill every moment with activity, with media, with social interaction, with anything that keeps the question at bay. And modern life makes this remarkably easy. There's always something to watch, something to scroll through, something to occupy your attention. You can go days, weeks, even months, without ever sitting still long enough for the feeling to fully surface. But it's there, isn't it? Underneath everything. And the moments when it breaks through, those moments become increasingly uncomfortable, increasingly difficult to bear. Some people turn to pleasure, to sensation. They pursue experiences that make them feel alive, even temporarily. Adventure, romance, substances, risk. Anything that creates intensity, that cuts through the numbness. And there's a logic to this. If nothing matters, then at least you can feel something, anything. The problem is that pleasure has this diminishing return. What once thrilled you becomes ordinary. You need more intensity, more novelty, more stimulation to achieve the same effect. And eventually you realize you're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place, still feeling that underlying emptiness. And then there's the philosophical response, the one that says, well, if nothing matters, then I'm free. If there's no inherent meaning, no cosmic purpose, then I can do whatever I want. This is the existentialist position. And there's something appealing about it. It sounds liberating. But notice what actually happens when you try to live from this place. The freedom feels more like abandonment than liberation. Yes, you can do whatever you want, but what do you want? Without any felt sense of what matters, freedom becomes a kind of paralysis. Every option is equally meaningless, which means there's no real basis for choosing one thing over another. What makes this whole experience particularly isolating is that it's so difficult to talk about. When you try to explain it to someone, they often respond with solutions, with suggestions, with reassurance. Have you tried exercise, therapy? Maybe you need a vacation. Maybe you're depressed and should consider medication. And these might all be helpful things, genuinely. But they miss the point, don't they? Because what you're experiencing isn't a problem to be solved. It's more like a question that won't go away, a seeing that can't be unseen. Or people will try to inspire you. They'll remind you of all the good things in your life, all the reasons you have to be grateful, all the people who love you, all the opportunities available to you. And you know they're right. Objectively, logically, you know you have a good life, perhaps even a great life. But that knowledge doesn't touch the feeling. It's like someone describing a delicious meal to you when you've lost your sense of taste. Yes, I understand this is supposed to be good, but I can't actually taste it. Sometimes the feeling becomes so pervasive that you start to wonder if this is just what life is, and everyone else is simply better at pretending otherwise. Maybe all of human civilization is just an elaborate distraction from this fundamental emptiness. We create culture, art, science, religion, relationships, all these complex systems and structures, not because they're inherently meaningful, but because we need to give ourselves something to do, some way to avoid facing the void at the center of everything. And there's a particularly modern dimension to this experience. Because we live in a time of unprecedented material comfort and opportunity, at least for many of us, our ancestors were too busy surviving to ask whether life had a point. The question of meaning was answered by necessity. You worked to eat, you had children to continue the family line, you participated in your community because you needed each other to survive. Purpose was built into the structure of life itself. But now, for many of us, survival is relatively secure. We have time, resources, options. We're told we can be anything, do anything, create our own meaning. And this freedom, this abundance of choice, it can actually make the question of pointlessness more acute. Because when you can do anything, the question becomes, yes, but what should I do? And who's to say? On what basis do you choose? What makes one path more meaningful than another when all paths are equally available and equally optional? You see this especially in the realm of work. Previous generations had roles, vocations, callings. You were a farmer because your family were farmers. You were a craftsman because that's what your community needed. Your work was woven into a larger social fabric that gave it context and significance. But now, work is supposed to be a form of self-expression, a source of personal fulfillment. You're supposed to find your passion, follow your purpose, make a difference. And if you don't feel passionate, if you don't feel fulfilled, if you're not making a difference, well, that's a personal failure, isn't it? You failed to find the meaningful work that was supposedly there waiting for you. The same pattern appears in relationships. They're supposed to complete you, make you happy, give your life meaning. Your partner is supposed to be your soulmate, your best friend, your source of passion and comfort and growth all at once. And if your relationship doesn't provide all these things, if it feels more like comfortable companionship than cosmic significance, you wonder if you're missing something, if you're with the wrong person, if real love would feel different. Even leisure time becomes fraught. You're supposed to have hobbies that enrich you, experiences that broaden you, travels that transform you. Every moment is supposed to be optimized, meaningful, worthwhile. And so when you find yourself spending your free time just, sitting there, or scrolling mindlessly, or doing something that doesn't improve you or fulfill you, there's this nagging sense of waste, of failure, of life slipping through your fingers while you do nothing important with it. And underneath all of this, underneath all these attempts to find meaning or create meaning or convince yourself that meaning exists, there's a simpler, more fundamental question. The question isn't really, what's the point of this particular activity or that particular goal? The question is, what's the point of me? Why am I here? What is this strange fact of my existence for? I didn't choose to be born. I didn't ask for consciousness, for this awareness that can turn back on itself and question its own purpose. And yet here I am, thrown into existence, expected to figure out what to do with it, expected to care about it, expected to find it meaningful. When you really sit with this, when you let yourself feel the full weight of it, there's a kind of vertigo, because you realize that you are this temporary, fragile, utterly contingent thing. You appeared out of nothing, you return to nothing, and in between, you're supposed to somehow make it all matter. You're supposed to care deeply about things that, in the grand scheme of the universe, don't register at all. The universe doesn't care if you're happy or sad, successful or unsuccessful, if you fulfill your potential or waste your life. It simply doesn't care. It's indifferent. And you're just a brief ripple in an incomprehensibly vast process that was unfolding long before you arrived and will continue long after you're gone. Now, you might think this recognition would make things worse, and often it does, at first, because it seems to confirm the feeling of pointlessness. If nothing matters in any ultimate sense, if the universe is indifferent, if we're all just temporary patterns of matter and energy that will eventually dissipate, then what's the point of anything? Why not just give up? Why not just surrender to the meaninglessness of it all? But here's where something interesting happens if you stay with it long enough, because there's something else underneath the pointlessness, underneath the exhaustion and the emptiness and the endless questioning. There's a deeper current that you can only feel when you stop trying so hard to find meaning or create meaning or prove that meaning exists. And that's what we need to look at. Not as another solution, not as another answer to the question of pointlessness, but as a different way of being with the question itself. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really consider it. When you say everything feels pointless, what is it that's doing the feeling? Who is it that's noticing the pointlessness? There's something here, isn't there? Something present, something aware. And that something, that awareness, it doesn't feel pointless. The awareness itself, the consciousness that's watching all of this, questioning all of this, it's not empty. It's actually quite full, quite alive, quite present. You see, we've gotten ourselves into a very peculiar bind. We've confused the meaning of our lives with the meaning of our thoughts about our lives. We think that life feels pointless because we can't think of a point to it. But life isn't something you think. Life is something you are. And the being of life, the actual living presence of existence, it doesn't require a point. It doesn't need justification. It doesn't need to prove its worth. It simply is. And the isness of it, the sheer fact of being alive and aware, that's not pointless. That's not empty. That's the most fundamental fullness there is. Now, I know this might sound like semantic games, like I'm just playing with words. But stay with me, because something important is happening here. When you look for the point of life, you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking forward into the future, towards some goal or purpose or destination that will make everything worthwhile. But life isn't happening in the future. Life is happening now. This moment, this breath, this sensation of being present and aware, this is life. Not the story about life, not the meaning of life, but life itself. And when you really pay attention to life itself, when you stop for a moment asking what it's for and simply notice what it is, something shifts. Because life, the actual immediate experience of being alive, it's extraordinary. Not because it's always pleasant or comfortable or fulfilling, but because it's here at all. The fact that there is something rather than nothing, the fact that you exist to experience anything whatsoever, this is, when you think about it, completely miraculous. You see, the question of pointlessness arises from a very specific assumption, an assumption we rarely examine. The assumption is that things need to have a point, that existence requires justification, that being alive is only worthwhile if it's for something. But where did this assumption come from? Who told you that your life needs a purpose beyond itself? Who said that the experience of existing isn't enough, that it needs to lead somewhere, accomplish something, mean something beyond what it already is? This is what I call the trap of instrumentality. We've learned to see everything as a means to an end. You go to school so you can get a job. You get a job so you can make money. You make money so you can be secure. You're secure so you can be happy. You're happy so you can, well, what? Live a meaningful life? And what's a meaningful life? One that has a point. And what's the point? To be happy. And around we go, each thing justified by the next thing, but never arriving at anything that's valuable in itself. But life itself, the actual living of it, isn't an instrument. It's not a means to something else. It's the thing itself. When you eat a delicious meal, you don't eat it in order to be full. Being full is part of the experience, certainly. But the point of eating isn't to arrive at fullness and then be done with it. The point of eating, if we must use that word, is the eating, the tasting, the savoring, the actual experience of it. And life is like this. The point of life isn't to arrive at some future state where you can finally say, ah, now it all makes sense. Now it's been worthwhile. The point of life, if there is one, is the living of it, right here, right now. You know what happens when you listen to music? You don't listen to a symphony in order to reach the final note. The final note isn't the point. If it were, the best music would be the shortest music. Just play that last note and be done with it. But that's absurd, isn't it? The point of music is the music itself, the unfolding of sound in time, the experience of listening moment by moment. And life is like this too. It's not going anywhere. There's no destination you're trying to reach where you can finally rest and say, there, I've successfully lived. Life is what's happening along the way, in the supposed in-between times that we think don't count. Now, I can almost hear the objection forming. You're thinking, yes, but that's all well and good for moments of pleasure or beauty or comfort. But what about the rest of it? What about the suffering, the boredom, the pain, the endless, tedious, grinding through days that feel empty and exhausting? Are you telling me those have a point simply because they're happening? That seems like a rather cruel joke. And you're right to push back on that, because I'm not suggesting that suffering is good or that you should simply accept everything that happens as equally wonderful. But I am suggesting something else. I'm suggesting that the feeling of pointlessness, the exhaustion, the sense that nothing matters, this isn't actually caused by your circumstances. It's caused by the way you're relating to your circumstances, by the constant background assumption that life should be different than it is, that you should be different than you are, that there's somewhere else you're supposed to be, or something else you're supposed to be doing. Think about what happens when you're deeply engaged in something. Not forcing yourself to be engaged, not trying to care, but genuinely absorbed. Maybe you're having a conversation that fascinates you, or you're working on a problem that captures your full attention, or you're watching a sunset, or playing with a child, or reading something that speaks to you. In those moments, do you stop and ask, but what's the point of this? No, you don't, because the question doesn't arise. The experience itself is sufficient. It doesn't need justification because you're not separate from it, analyzing it, judging it. You're simply in it, part of it, flowing with it. The feeling of pointlessness, then, isn't about your life lacking meaning. It's about you standing outside your life, observing it, judging it, constantly evaluating whether it measures up to some imagined standard of what life should be. And from that position, of course, everything feels empty, because you've split yourself in two. There's the life that's happening, and then there's you, the observer, standing apart from it, asking if it's good enough, meaningful enough, worthwhile enough. And that observer, that judge, it's never satisfied, because satisfaction isn't its function. Its function is to evaluate, to compare, to find lacking. But who is this observer? Who is this judge that stands apart from life evaluating it? When you look closely, when you really try to find this separate self that's supposedly outside looking in, you can't find it. There's just experience happening, awareness of experience happening, but no separate entity apart from it all. The observer is itself part of the observed. The thinker of thoughts is just another thought. The self that seems to stand outside your life, questioning its meaning, is itself part of the life it's questioning. And this is where everything inverts. Because the search for meaning, the need to find a point to it all, this is itself the problem. Not because meaning doesn't exist, but because you're looking for it in the wrong way. You're looking for it as if meaning is something separate from experience, something that could be added to life to make it worthwhile. But meaning isn't separate from experience. Meaning is the texture of experience itself when you're fully present to it, when you're not busy evaluating it or wishing it were different. Let me put it another way. When you ask, "What's the point?" you're really asking, "Why should I care about this?" And underneath that question is an assumption that you're separate from this, that you're a subject confronted with an object world that may or may not be worth your investment. But the actual truth of your experience, when you look at it directly, is that there's no such separation. You are not in the world encountering experiences that may or may not be meaningful. You are the world experiencing itself, knowing itself in this particular form, in this particular moment. The pointlessness you feel then is the exhaustion of maintaining this fiction of separation. It's tiring, isn't it? This constant evaluation, this endless questioning, this need to justify your existence. And the exhaustion itself is a kind of signal, a message from your deeper intelligence saying, "Stop, this isn't working, there's another way." What's the other way? It's the way of participation rather than observation. Instead of standing apart from your life asking what it means, you become your life, fully, completely. Not by forcing yourself to care about things you don't care about, but by dropping the question of whether you should care and simply allowing yourself to be present to what is. And here's the paradox. When you stop looking for meaning, when you stop demanding that life justify itself to you, meaning appears, not as something added to experience, but as the natural flavor of experience when you're not constantly filtering it through judgment and evaluation. A conversation becomes meaningful not because it's leading somewhere or accomplishing something, but because you're actually having it, actually listening, actually present. Work becomes meaningful not because it's fulfilling some grand purpose, but because you're actually doing it, bringing your full attention to it, engaging with it as it is, rather than as you think it should be. This is what the old Zen masters meant when they said that before enlightenment you chop wood and carry water, and after enlightenment you chop wood and carry water. The actions are the same, but the relationship to them is completely different. You're no longer standing outside your life wishing it were different, waiting for the meaningful part to begin. You're in your life as your life, and the question of meaning or pointlessness simply doesn't arise in the same way. Now, this doesn't mean that everything suddenly becomes wonderful, or that you're happy all the time, or that you stop wanting things to change. You'll still have preferences, still work toward goals, still hope for certain outcomes rather than others. But it's all much lighter, much less burdened, because you're not freighting every moment with this impossible demand that it justify your existence. You can want things without needing them to make your life meaningful. You can work toward goals without needing to achieve them to prove you're worthwhile. You can fail, struggle, suffer even, without it meaning that your life is pointless. Because here's what we've forgotten. Life doesn't need a point. That's not a depressing realization. It's actually deeply liberating. Because if life doesn't need a point, then you are free. Free from the crushing burden of having to make your life mean something. Free from the constant anxiety that you're not doing enough, not being enough, not living right. Free to simply be here, alive, aware, experiencing whatever is arising in this moment without needing it to be anything more than what it is. And in that freedom, something wonderful happens. The world becomes interesting again. Not because you've found the answer to the question of meaning, but because you've stopped asking the question in that desperate, grasping way. You start to notice things again. The quality of light in the morning, the taste of your coffee, the feeling of breath moving in your body, the strange miracle of being able to think thoughts and form words and communicate with other beings who are also somehow alive and aware. None of this needs to be for anything. It's enough that it is. You see, the universe, this whole vast unfolding process, it's not going anywhere. There's no destination it's trying to reach. no purpose it's trying to fulfill. It's simply playing itself out, moment by moment, in an infinite variety of forms. And you are one of those forms. You're what the universe is doing right here, right now, in this particular location. You're not in the universe having an experience. You are the universe having an experience of itself. And from this perspective, the question, what's the point, is like a wave asking, what's the point of being a wave? The wave isn't separate from the ocean, trying to justify its existence. The wave is what the ocean is doing in that moment. It arises, it moves, it falls, and then the water that formed the wave becomes part of the next wave. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Nothing needs to be for anything other than what it is. This is what the mystics have always tried to point to. Not a belief system you need to adopt, not a philosophy you need to follow, but a direct recognition of what you actually are underneath all the concepts and stories and judgments. You are not a separate self trying to find meaning in a meaningless universe. You are the universe meaning itself, knowing itself, experiencing itself in this particular form. And when that recognition really lands, not as an idea, but as a felt sense, everything changes and nothing changes. You still have your life, your responsibilities, your struggles and joys and mundane routines, but you're not carrying them in the same way. There's a lightness, a playfulness even, because you're not taking yourself quite so seriously anymore. You see, through the game of self, the story of me trying to make my life meaningful, trying to justify my existence, you realize you don't need to justify your existence. Your existence justifies itself simply by being. So what do you do with this? How do you live from this recognition? Well, you don't really do anything with it, because it's not a technique or a practice or a method. It's more like a remembering, a coming back to something you've always known but forgotten. And the forgetting is natural, part of the game. You'll forget and remember, probably for the rest of your life. But each time you remember, it gets a little easier, a little more familiar. And in the meantime, you just live. You do what needs doing, what calls to you, what appears in front of you. Not because it's meaningful, not because it's the right thing to do, not because it will make your life worthwhile, but simply because you're alive. And this is what being alive looks like. Sometimes it looks like work, sometimes like play, sometimes like suffering, sometimes like joy. All of it is life. All of it is the universe exploring itself through your form. The feeling of pointlessness, then, isn't your enemy. It's not a problem to be solved or a state to escape from. It's an invitation, a doorway, a call to wake up from the dream of separation, the exhausting fiction that you're a separate self trying to make a separate life meaningful. When everything feels pointless, that's life saying, stop trying so hard. Stop demanding that I be something I'm not. Just be here. Just be present. Just let yourself live without needing it to mean anything more than what it is. And that's enough. In fact, it's everything. Not because it's profound or spiritual or enlightened, but because it's actual. It's real. It's what's here when you stop looking somewhere else for something else that will finally make everything worthwhile. The whole search for meaning was a distraction from the only thing that's ever been real, which is this, right here, right now. Your life, exactly as it is, in all its ordinariness and extraordinariness, its beauty and its plainness, its joy and its sorrow. All of it, the whole catastrophe, as Zorba called it. Not meaningful or meaningless, but simply, wonderfully, mysteriously alive.